Thompson Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Of course, we are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. It's our pleasure to welcome to the show, I believe for the first time, Ben Golliver from the Washington Post, covers the NBA. He's out in Las Vegas for Team USA's training camp, and then ultimately Summer League will make its way out there as well. Ben, thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it, and welcome to the show.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Glad to be here.
So yesterday, all of a sudden, the entire basketball world went, oh, okay, this Cooper Flagg kid, we knew he was good, but wow, he puts up big numbers in the scrimmage and is making plays all over the place against Team USA. For those that don't know, Flagg, the projected number one pick in 2025, which may or may not be relevant to the hometown Wizards here, of course. But you were there, like, to try to describe what happened yesterday. How would you describe Cooper Flagg and kind of the wowness of him leading the USA select team down to a wire? You know, the Team USA ultimately wins the scrimmage, but it is incredibly close, thanks in large part to Flagg.
No, that's right. And I would say it's incredibly relevant for these Washington Wizards because they should be playing capture the flag next season, no doubt about it. I mean, it looks like they're headed that direction, kind of going into tank mode, developmental mode with these young players. And that's what you should do. I mean, to me, Cooper Flagg is probably the best American prospect we've seen since Kevin Durant. I think he's on that level in terms of his all-around game, his two-way impact, his polish, and really what you saw in this scrimmage. I mean, typically not one player is going to dominate these scrimmages because there's so much talent on the court, and the media was only let in really for about the last half an hour, so we didn't get the full scope of the game. But as soon as they opened the doors, it was just a Cooper Flagg takeover. I mean, he's just banging off the dribble threes over the top of Anthony Davis. I mean, the Lakers center, he's probably the best defensive player in the NBA, or right up there with like Victor Wembanyama. He's backing down Jrue Holiday, who was just playing defense in the finals against Luka Doncic and hitting turnarounds over Jrue Holiday. He's flying up the court, leaping over Miami Heat center Bam Adebayo. He's played in a couple finals to get a tough and one finish in the paint. He's dribbling the ball up the court, showing off his handle. He's guarding guards on the perimeter, showing his quick feet. He's a really, really intelligent basketball player, super high IQ. And then on top of everything, he just plays harder than just about everyone because his motor is just always on 11. That's just how he plays. So maybe he's not as natural of a scorer as Kevin Durant. Maybe he's not as good of a virtuoso playmaker as like a LeBron James when he was a teenager. But Cooper just makes winning plays time and time and time again. And he got that select team, the junior varsity team, back into that game. And, there was people who were, kind of on the sideline screaming for Cooper to get the ball in the last play because they wanted to see if he could hit the game winner, but it didn't go that way. But still, everybody left kind of impressed and wowed that a guy who's 17 years old, who's going against a dream team that's full of 12 NBA All-Stars, probably at least 10 future Hall of Famers, wound up being the talk of the camp. It was stunning. You saw LeBron afterwards come over and give him a little pat on the butt. It was kind of like a congratulatory moment. And, LeBron knows a teenage phenom when he sees one, and that was the passing of the torch type moment between those two guys at yesterday's scrimmage.
Yeah, I'm so curious the reaction of those type of guys because, often it's funny because we talked about this in very different ways with the W this year and the influx of that rookie class and the talent there. But in the NBA, there's a little bit of that too. Like, all right, rookie, like you can be good, but I'm going to show you. And then with Wemby, everyone was like, yeah, we're going to try our best while we can, but we know this dude's going to be the best player on the planet sooner rather than later. And was there kind of that acknowledgement that Flagg is, to quote the kids, Ben, that Flagg is him already at this point, and that, well, yes, he'll have a transition period, and yes, it will take a while for him to reach the peak of his powers, that this is a kid that is already one of the, 30 best basketball players on the planet, even though he's a year from getting drafted?
Well, he's definitely him. There's no question. He's the next one up. And I think, the NBA culture is a little bit different than the WNBA culture, especially when it comes to USA basketball, because I think they're trying to set up these next generations, right? So USA basketball brings in an Anthony Edwards at age 22 as the youngest guy on the team, in part because they're thinking, 4 years down the road, 8 years down the road, Anthony Edwards might be the face of the team, sort of like LeBron and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry are right now. So they're trying to set up this lineage, right? And USA Basketball is also probably thinking, hey, there's a FIBA World Cup tournament in 2027. It sure would be awesome if Cooper Flagg, when he's 20 years old and he's already in the NBA for a couple of years, it sure would be nice if he was on that team, kind of leading that team potentially to gold. So it's a very welcoming atmosphere. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to go at him and test him a little bit. And you see some of those one-on-one moments but I don't think it's malicious in any way. And Cooper told me after the scrimmage, he's like, look, these guys are just telling me to stay level-headed, keep grinding, and keep putting in the work. Don't get too high, don't get too low. And that's pretty standard advice from, older players to young players. But it's evidence that they care about his future as opposed to trying to go out there and show him up as a teenager, right? So I think it was a win-win-win all around. Not only did Cooper Flagg really get to go viral on social media and introduce his game to a whole lot of players, not only did he earn the respect from the elder statesmen, but those guys were able to show that they care about their sport. They're good ambassadors for basketball and for this USA basketball program and for the program itself, where they're always trying to recruit guys. And some years it's easier to recruit than others. I mean, everybody wants to go to Paris, right? Maybe not everybody wants to go to some of these World Cup tournaments halfway across the world, and to kind of give Cooper a great taste of this experience and keep him involved with the program going forward. It's a big win for a guy like Grant Hill, who's the new managing director, and also Steve Kerr, who's the coach.
Ben Golliver, Washington Post, with us here on The Hoffman Show. When we talk about Flagg and his NBA prospects, we know that this is going to be a loaded draft in 2025, and as long as the Wizards can stay in the top 5, they'll get a great prospect of some variety. But how different is Flagg compared to Ace Bailey and the rest of this class?
Well, I saw both those guys play at the Hoop Summit back in March and April up in Portland, Oregon, and I just thought Cooper was much more polished, much more NBA ready at this point than Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey's got a lot of potential, and with Cooper, it's reality. Like, he's ready to make impact winning at a very high level. I expect Duke to be a really, really, really good team. I expect him to be a huge part of that Duke team during his freshman season, and that's what separates him from everybody else in his class. I did this story on him a few months ago, and the key takeaway to me is his ambition. He's so talented. He's had that talent ever since he was like 11, 12 years old. And at every step of his journey, he's always sought out tougher competition to test himself. So he's playing in small-town Maine as a freshman. He wins a state championship. So rather than staying in Maine and just doing that 4 times and being like the biggest hero of Maine, he immediately transfers to Montverde Academy, which is, kind of the new Oak Hill in terms of, the best premier national basketball programs in the country. He goes to Montverde, immediately has a big impact there, continues to develop his game. He's playing against future college players in practice every single day, and he decides heading into his junior season, I'm going to reclassify. I'm going to skip a grade because I want to get to college faster and get to the NBA faster because I want tougher competition. So he leads Montverde to an undefeated season last year, a national championship, and he graduates high school in 3 years instead of 4. So now he's 17 years old going to Duke, and when it comes time to choose the program that he wants to go to, he says, I don't care if everybody's going to look at me as kind of like the quote-unquote next white Duke villain. I want to go and play for the most prestigious program on the biggest stage. I want all the pressure. I want the Cameron Crazies cheering for me. And this USA basketball camp's another example. They never take guys this young in this camp to play on the select team, right? Usually it's NBA players. All of his teammates were pretty much NBA players or free agents. And then occasionally they've brought in like 3rd or 4th year college guys for this program. And so for Cooper to be even just invited to this camp, it's another example of his ambition and how far ahead of the curve he is. And so I think that's why if you're a team like the Washington Wizards, Cooper is the kind of foundational player you need. If you're trying to build a winning culture, if you want a leader on the court, if you want somebody who's going to be all about basketball and no nonsense, that's going to be Cooper Flagg. And I think that's what's got the GM so excited about him.
Ben Golliver, Washington Post, with us from Las Vegas. USA basketball camp ongoing as they prepare for the 2024 Paris Olympics. Get back to the Wizards in a second, Ben, but the other big story that comes out of USA camp is the comments that I'm sure you had to be there for by Anthony Edwards, where he's like, everyone's going to have to fit in around me. I'm the number one option. How did that play in the room, and how has that been received generally? And also, is there some part of him that's correct in that analysis?
No, definitely not. I mean, on this particular team, he's not going to be the number one option, not even close to it. This is going to be a veteran-dominated USA basketball dream team. LeBron is going to be the central force. I mean, during these practices, he's sort of the alpha on the court. Steph Curry is chasing his first Olympics, so he's going to play a lot of minutes. And then Kevin Durant's going for a record 4th gold medal. So those are going to be kind of the headliner players. And they're also leaning a lot on Joel Embiid, who hasn't played for USA basketball before, but really addresses a problem they've had in some previous tournaments where they just haven't been big enough inside. They got bullied at last year's FIBA World Cup. They don't want that to happen again. They had a pretty small team at the Tokyo Olympics as well, and they potentially have to match up with Nikola Jokic or Wembanyama or Rudy Gobert during this summer's Olympics. So they want to be big and bulky and have a front line that can really do some damage. So I don't really see Anthony Edwards as being a top priority on this year's group like he was last year, where he sort of emerged as the leading scorer for that FIBA World Cup team. But it speaks to his innate confidence. It speaks to his swagger. I think his tongue was a little bit in cheek when he answered that question. He likes to play to the crowd. He likes to make people laugh. He's kind of got that goofy side to him. And so I think that was kind of how he delivered those comments. In response to other questions, he made it clear he thinks Kevin Durant's going to be the alpha in fourth quarter moments. And he also said, look, he wanted to be on this team because he wanted to get an up close and personal view of watching Kevin Durant on the Olympic stage, because that's who he grew up, kind of idolizing as his favorite player. So this is a great learning opportunity for Edwards. He's only 22. He's by far the youngest guy on the team. And I think USA Basketball is hoping he could be the face of that LA Olympic team, because this could very well be the last dance for LeBron, Steph, and KD on the international stage.
You'd have to think so, but then that'd have to be us accepting that LeBron James is being and not a cyborg. And I don't know that I'm ready to accept that yet. Last thing for you, Ben, the biggest story, of course, of the Wizards offseason, outside of the drafting of the three guys, related, though, is the Deni Avdija trade. And now that we've had a couple of weeks here and you've been around folks out in Vegas and had a chance to talk to people around the league, that seems to be, from talking to, for instance, your colleague Ava Wallace at the Post, it seems to be a trade that came not totally out of nowhere, but kind of out of nowhere. And I'm curious, when you talk to folks around the league and it comes up, like what is the post-mortem NBA-wide reaction to the Deni Avdija trade?
Well, look, everybody kind of sees the direction the Wizards are trying to go, and Deni is a winning player. And if, you're in a situation where you're really trying to steer towards a top draft pick, I'm not sure he prevents you from doing that, because he played a lot of minutes last year and the Wizards lost a lot of games last year, but he just might not quite be on their timeline age-wise in terms of what they're trying to build. I think the other thing that you have to look at is that losing leaves a mark. And Deni Avdija has had a really tough Wizards career. He's been there for more years than it seems. It feels like he just got there, but they've lost a lot of games during his tenure. And I could understand why somebody in that position would potentially want a change of scenery, right? It's just, it would wear on anybody in that spot. He's had multiple coaches. He's had multiple sets of teammates around him, and it doesn't really feel like they've made a ton of progress. So I could see why potentially he would be interested in a fresh start. The other aspect you have to look at, though, is that they need to have a point guard, right? And this Tyus Jones situation hasn't been resolved yet. Malcolm Brogdon would be a classic plug-in type guy there if they were to lose Jones in free agency, or if they were to move him in some sort of a deal. And so, you can't go into next season, even if you're trying to lose, with Jordan Poole as like your only ball handler. You have to have somebody else who can kind of have a steady hand on the wheel. And I think that was probably part of their thinking here as well. And of course, they want to add the extra draft pick. They want to take a shot on a young guy as well, who they were excited about. I think that's probably a major motivating factor as well. But I think for Washington, Michael Winger now is coming up. Basically, he's been on the job for a year. We're starting to see which direction he wants to go. And this is going to be a huge season. They really need to get a great draft pick in next year's draft, because this is going to be their shot to get a foundational guy. With the players that he's assembled right now, it just feels like they're going to continue to keep cycling indefinitely, unless they can get a big time player. I like Alex Sarr. I think he's got some potential, that number 2 pick that they took. I just don't think he's going to be a franchise level player like a typical number 2 pick would be. And that's why they've got to hope that they can get that guy in next year's draft.
For sure. What's going on with Tyus? Because, last year, the trade deadline, we all thought he'd be gone. And then all of a sudden they don't get the return they want. They hold on to him, and everyone's like, this is insanely stupid. What are you guys doing? You know he's going to leave in the offseason. And they're like, whoa, we kind of want him back. And now we all thought, like, hey, this is a guy that every team would want to Tyus Jones. What's the disconnect here where he doesn't have a team yet?
Well, I think it could be related to this idea of the new second apron era. We've seen some people just kind of hanging out there waiting for deals. Brandon Ingram's been another guy who's been just kind of waiting for resolution on his situation. And I think part of the issue could be that Typically like your market value, when they change the rules like this and make it harder for teams to spend money, the contracts that are available for free agents typically aren't as big as they would hope, right? And so it could be that he had fewer suitors than maybe he was expecting. It could be the numbers didn't come in where he thought. And for an incumbent team like Washington, maybe you're kind of sitting there hoping, well, if the price comes down far enough, maybe you can work a deal and keep him around. But I thought he was one of the best free agent point guards available on this summer's market. I thought there was a couple teams, especially developing teams like the San Antonio Spurs or the Orlando Magic, that should have taken a look at him just because he is such a trustworthy ball handler, amazing assist to turnover ratio, a guy who would really plug in and help, provide some structure for those young teams. Now, obviously, the Spurs went and got Chris Paul to kind of fill that role. They already have Tyus's brother, Trey Jones. Maybe they don't need both Jones brothers on the roster. So, we got to see who's interested in adding a point guard. There weren't a ton of teams this summer that actually needed point guards, so that could be part of the hang-up, too. If I'm Tyus, I would, probably be interested in a different environment just because, like we've been saying, this is a team that's, really heading to a deep rebuild. And he's a guy who's used to playing on playoff teams, playing important minutes for those teams, and, being part of winning basketball, dating back to, playing for Minnesota and Memphis. So I'm not sure it's the greatest fit there in Washington for him, but we can understand how some of these cap situations that have developed are making life more difficult for free agents.
Yeah, no doubt. And the thing is with him, it doesn't make any sense why he'd want to come back, except for he just really liked it here. Like, I will say that the thing that I keep hearing from everyone around the Wizards, it's like, yeah, no, it's a good place to work. Like, people genuinely like being here. The players feel supported. You just have to know you're signing up for not winning. And an odd number of players are like, fine. I would like to know what my role is. Maybe it's a little bigger than it would be somewhere else. And I like the people. So at least they got that going for them, which is nice, I guess.
No, I think that definitely counts as progress. And it's something that, it's more of a macro thought. But like you look at DeMar DeRozan going to the Sacramento Kings, or you look at Pascal Siakam signing that big contract with the Indiana Pacers. I think Rick Carlisle said that Siakam was like the biggest free agency move they'd ever made. I think the Sacramento Kings were saying that DeRozan's like the biggest player they've gotten in free agency in decades, right? These are repercussions of the new salary cap environment, right? Like there's not enough room to have star players kind of go, team up on the same team. You've got to spread that talent out. And so, it creates opportunities for teams that have been passed over, like a Sacramento or a Washington or an Indiana. This is definitely creating opportunities for those teams to be more competitive for free agents and to, build a culture where players feel like they have a chance, right? And so for Washington, it may still be a year or two away, but, these new cap rules should help the Wizards not only retain talent, but build up a core of players that actually, can stay together and compete with the big market teams maybe in ways that they haven't in the past.
Yeah, this is the first time with the first, second apron stuff that I've ever seen owners and GMs finally actually be able to contain themselves versus just paying mediocre players top dollar. So maybe it's finally working. Maybe there will be a middle class of the NBA, Ben. Maybe.
I think you're all over it, man. I think that's exactly right. And, right now there's going to be a little bit of a pinch, right? Like as these players are sorting through this new reality, it's kind of the opposite of when they had the cap spike in 2016 right. And everybody got paid. But that will work itself out over the next year or two. And teams that are well positioned from a flexibility standpoint are definitely going to benefit. You saw that with Oklahoma City this summer. They had some cap space to spend, so they can go make targeted additions like an Isaiah Hartenstein to plug their front court hole. I think Washington, those guys, they're sort of Oklahoma City disciples. I think they're of the same mindset. They want to be in a flexible position, so when talent cuts free down the road, they're able to be proactive and at it.
Yeah, no doubt. It's Ben Golliver, everybody, from the Washington Post, live with us from USA Basketball's training camp in Las Vegas. Ben, appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Take care.
This is The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.